We are very excited to have a guest speaker here today. Today, we are joined by Nickerson. She holds a BA in International Relations from Brown University and a Master's of Economics from the London School of Economics. Um, she has serves on the board for corporate growth, national capital. She's an active partner with Next Gen Venture Partners, but she is also one of the co-founders of Artifacts. She serves as the Chief Growth and Strategy Officer of Red 5 Holdings Inc. and she was president of Red 5 Privacy Labs LLC. While at Red 5, she drove corporate growth, led corporate brand and service line marketing, and pursued new entrepreneurial lines of business. And then before joining Red 5, she served as an intelligence analyst with the Central Intelligence Agency, including serving as a briefer in the war zone tour in Afghanistan. So she has some amazing experiences, and we are super excited to have her joining with us today. Heather, if you'd like to join us.
Great. Thank you so much, Allison, for the introduction. I appreciate it. And welcome, everyone. I'm very excited to be here with you today to talk about stories and stuff. So a bit about my background with regards to stories and stuff. So my journey with all things stuff started 6 years ago, not long after my mother's death. As the eldest and only girl, I was left with a house full of stuff and no idea what my mother wanted us to keep, donate, or sell. After months and months of going through stuff and asking others for stories, my aunts, my uncles, friends who knew my mother in college, like you name it, no stone was left unturned. I figured there had to be an easier way to do this. There had to be an easy way to pair the stories with the stuff. That was the genesis for Artifacts, the web and app-based company that myself and my co-founder have built from the ground up. Our goal is to ensure that people everywhere have a way to pass down stories and not just things. Without further ado, let's jump right into today's topic. So we like to say, got stuff. We all do. Some of it is really important stuff, and you know it simply by looking at it. It could be, great grandma's jewelry. It could be, great Aunt Louise's silver collection. Those are things that have been in the family for generations. Other items are really valuable. And you know that by looking at those too. It could be crystal, it could be china, it could be a painting, but you know it when you see it. Other stuff is really important, but no one would know unless we told them. These could be things like letters that your grandpa wrote to your grandma during World War I or World War II. It could be, pieces of kids' art or kids' art projects that your child or your grandchild made. They have tremendous sentimental value, or what we call heart value. But there's really no way of knowing that until you actually get the story behind the object. So today we're going to spend a bunch of time learning best practices on how to best capture the story, the history, and the meaning behind all of your stuff. And then once we figured out how to do that, we're going to learn, what do we do with it afterwards? How can we make these stories, these histories, these memories, and all of your things work for you? We'll talk about being able to export the information to your homeowner's insurance policy, being able to share the information with your estate planner or your attorney for your estate plan or your will. What about sending it for an evaluation or an appraisal so you know how much it's worth? And also privately sharing with friends and family. Sometimes you just want to be able to share and not have the world know, but have your family know. We'll talk about how to do that and how to, get the most out of those connections in your network. Really, the choice is yours, and we'll give you a lot of options today to consider. So, but first, without further ado, let's talk about briefly why stories matter. Stories are often a way for people to keep the memories and the histories alive long after either the person, the event, or even the pet has passed. We all know either ourselves or people that have cherished memories and stories of things long ago. As a kid, you always love to ask, like, tell me a story, Grandma. Or, more often like, well, why is that the case? What happened then? There's so much to discover and to know. And we tell that by story. Stories are critically important. You think about going to a museum and we know so much about the ancient Egyptians or the Mayans or other civilizations because of the stories passed down along with the objects. We see time and again the power of story for conveying that history, that meaning, really the importance of the objects of that moment in time. Oftentimes, though, what happens is that stories reside within an individual. Sometimes we're lucky within a group of individuals or a network, but oftentimes it's a single person. And that was the case with my mother. A lot of her family stories resided with her. She was the family keeper. So she knew the family legends, the family myths. She could tell you, oh, that was fact, or no, that was definitely not fact, did not happen that way. This is what happened. And as a child, I remember, or I think I remember some of these stories, but I don't. Like they're lost even to me, one generation removed. So oftentimes, if you don't take the time to record the story, the history, or the memories, they could be lost for generations to come. And that's what we call legacy lost. And we never want that. We never want anyone to be in that position. That's why we started Artifacts, was to avoid the losing of legacy, the losing of history, stories, and memories, and ensuring that you can pass down not just things, but stories as well. So with that kind of broad overview of what we're going to cover today, I'm going to turn my camera off and jump right into the presentation. I'll be using our website, artifacts.com, artifcts.com, to walk through all the things you're going to see today. I'm also, when we get into the part of actually diving into entering details and stories about objects, I will be artifacting an object that I have, and I'll show you now so you can visually see it as we get into it. But this is a little three-legged pig that my husband bought me in Chile, and I've not yet artifacted it, but today we'll do that together. And you'll see how we go through that process to attach the story behind this three-legged pig to the actual object. So without further ado, I will share my screen and we will start with the presentation. And I would echo what Allison said, feel free to put questions into the Q&A box. We will get to that after the presentation is over. So I'm currently on our website. I'm going to cheat. I'm already logged in. So you can see that here's my profile here. I'm going to go over to my favorites, which I have pinned. And I'm going to start off telling you all a story, sharing a story about my own experience with stories and things. So these are some of my favorite artifacts. I'm going to go down here to Grandmom's brass trays. This is not my grandmom, just to be full disclosure. This is one of our members, but she publicly shared this artifact. And I had the pleasure of artifacting with her in person during one of our concierge sessions. So a little bit of a background about Grandmom. So Grandmom has these 3 brass trays, you can see right here. They've been hanging on her wall for over 30 years. They're beautifully hand-etched, gorgeous. She bought them in New Delhi when she was living in Kathmandu. And she has this entire story you can see here about how once a week she used to fly into New Delhi from Kathmandu to buy fresh fruits and vegetables. She and her friend would go to this market they always went to. What's very interesting is that before she ever told the story, Grandmom has 3 sons. And each of her sons thought these brass trays were just knickknacks she bought at Home Goods or Pier 1 or someplace. They had no idea that they were actually bought in India. So Grandma and I start artifacting together, and she tells me this wonderful story about the reason she actually bought the trays was involved a king cobra. And she goes on to explain how she was shopping, she was buying peaches, she had a basket full of peaches. She was looking at the tray, she heard a hiss in her ear and turned around, and there was a man with a giant king cobra sitting on his shoulder. And much to her surprise, she was not expecting it. She screamed, dropped the trays, dropped the peaches, and ran. She now has this great story about these trays. So she did this. She also added an audio file here that has her voice telling the story. I'll pause for a moment and play that so you can hear it.
Well, we were looking at stuff and I heard this right in my ear. And I turned like that and there was a king cobra sitting right there. And
that is Grandmom's story in her own words. So she created this artifact. She then shared it with her 3 sons. I went home that evening on my merry way back to my family, and I suddenly start getting a bunch of texts later that evening with a ton of emojis and smiley faces and hearts. And you would not believe this, but now that my sons know the story, all three boys want one of the brass trays. They no longer have to go to Goodwill. She had resigned herself to having these beautiful hand-etched brass trays probably end up in Goodwill because her sons had never showed any interest or any desire to have the trays. So grandmom was quite excited when she found out that the trays were going to be saved and would be rehomed with one of her, each boy would get a tray when she passed away. So that was a huge, in her mind, a huge success story. And it showed the power of telling the story. If no one had ever thought to ask, well, what is the story behind those trays? Or tell me more, where did you get them? Where did they come from? You would have missed out on all this beautiful history and detail. So that is the first example I want to share with you. I'm going to do one more example for you all. Another example involves one of the items I have in my collection. So I have my grandmother's china. And this is a great story. Technically, she's my grandmother-in-law, not my grandmom, but she is very much the grandmom to me. She has this beautiful set of china. And her children, none of them wanted the china. And what was really interesting is that they all thought it was a slightly different story, that she either got it from her mother, or one of them thought it was from her sister. Another thought it was a wedding gift. No one knew the real story behind grandmom's china. So when I got married, she gifted me the china shortly thereafter. And it's not a particularly valuable set of china. It's fairly common. It's Noritake china. It's got a beautiful pattern on it. You can see the details here. But what makes it really unique is the story. It was not something she inherited from a family member. It was not even something she got as a wedding gift. She actually bought the china while stationed overseas in Monrovia. You see, grandmom was part of the diplomatic corps. And back in the day, it was expected that even the most junior diplomatic corps officers had to do a lot of entertaining. So when she had packed up and went to Monrovia, she assumed, well, I'm living in, Monrovia. I need to take hiking boots and pants and bug repellent and mosquito netting. She never thought to pack china. And the way that she tells the story, you can see right here, she essentially got called into the embassy and was recommended that she very quickly get a set of china for 12 because she has to entertain and host formal dinners. So the story behind this china is that she had to source it while living in Africa in the 1960s, which isn't an easy thing to do. It's not like you can go on Amazon and simply get the china. So for me, I love the story behind this china. It makes me smile and laugh every time I see it. And again, if we never stop to ask and say, where did you get this? Where did it come from? What's the story behind this? We would have never known. Her own children all had different stories that they thought about the china and where it came from. But it wasn't until I sat down and asked her for the actual story did we get this story. And now that the real story is known, it's, everyone in the family just thinks it's the greatest thing. And no one's fighting over the china, but there have been comments of, well, if you no longer want it, I would gladly take the china, which is funny because, until we got married, it was one of those things that no one really wanted this china. It sat in the back of the cabinet. So again, just a couple of quick illustrations of the power of story. And then knowing what questions to ask, and more importantly, knowing how to connect that story with those objects. So having said that, I want to jump in to actually showing you how to connect the story with the object using our platform called Artifacts. I want to mention up front that anyone and everyone can artifact completely and totally free of charge. Your first 5 artifacts are free. There are no strings attached. We don't even ask for your credit card information. So go ahead, give it a try. But I am going to show you how we do it. And I'm going to walk through some best practices on what information to elicit as part of the story to make it a really compelling story. So how we do that is I'm going to go over here, right here. Again, I'm already logged in. I'm going to go here to add an artifact. And if you remember that 3-legged pig I showed you from Chile, That's going to be the one that we do. We're going to add the story to that pig today and create an artifact that, my children can have, and they will now know the story behind the pig. So the first thing to get started when you're in this field right here, you can choose to use quick form, which is really just a very simple way. It's what is the artifact, pick the category, add the story, add the country, you're done, or full form, which asks for more details. I'm going to start us in quick form, and then I'll show you some of the other fields as we go through. But right here, let's first, the first part about starting the story is picking the object. We all know I'm going to add the pig, so I'm going to upload the photos. I have cheated, I've already taken the photos, but if I was starting from scratch, I could take the photos from my phone, from my iPad, from my camera, and transfer them to my laptop. But I'll go right here, and I have the two photos right here. So I'm going to add the photos. And here is my object that I'm going to tell the story about. I can choose to crop the photos. I can choose to keep them the same size. I'll just quickly save them. And I want this to be the cover photo. I want that to be the first photo people see, because now they know instantaneously this is the pig. They may not know that's the pig from this view, and that's okay. But I wanted the back view to see that he really does only have 3 legs, which the whole story behind this you'll learn is for good luck. So I'm going to name my artifact. Let's start there. Let's give this a name. So this is very simple. We'll call him Chilean pig. My husband bought him for me in Chile. So what is this? This is where we pick a category. And this is really just to help you as you grow your collection and add your stories and memories and histories over time to be able to quickly sort and search. So I'm going to say that this is, let's call it art. And let's just call it sculpting and forming, because it is a little mini ceramic pig statue. And now we get to the fun part. We get to the story. So when we think about storytelling and attaching stories to objects, where do we start? Sometimes it can be very overwhelming, and I want to assure you it doesn't have to be. Just start with the obvious. What is this and what makes it special? So in my case, I'm going to say this is the 3-legged pig that my husband, excuse my typing, bought me in Chile. It could be that simple. At least now, if my daughter or our other children are going through our stuff one day, they now know what is this pig. But that's just the start of the story. So you can add other details. And you can always go back and add more over time. But since we're going to talk about the core of how do you add details to story, let's go through and add them all now. So who gave it to you? So I mentioned here that my husband bought the pig for me in Chile. Is the object new or new only to me? So I'm going to note, I had never seen a 3-legged pig before, but in Chile, they are thought to be symbols of good luck. This now adds a bit more detail to the story. It's no longer just a 3-legged pig statue, but now there's meaning behind it. It's meant to be good luck. And I can go on and add like any memorable events or quotes or histories that go with the object. I'm going to add a statement from my husband that he bought me the pig to give me good luck as I was growing my company. So my husband bought me the pig for good luck as I was growing my company. Really simple. Just again, it's a small piece of the story, but it gives more context. The kids now know, all right, this was a good luck, either charm or token. There's some meaning behind that. That right there could be more than enough. There's something attached to this object. I can now pick the country of origin. We know it's from Chile, so we'll pick Chile. Goes out. I can click save. I can also, since we're here with an artifacts in the system, I can create a tag. Tags are really great for being able to, again, think of it as a virtual folder to sort and search for all of your artifacts. I have a tag that I have from Matt with love. It's right here. That's my husband. So all the things that he gets me, I tag from Matt with love. So I can very quickly find them again. So now that I've done that, I have the name of what the artifact is. I have the category, and I have a short story. I have the country. I'm going to go ahead and save it. And I'll show you what that looks like. And then we're going to go back in and add some more details to this, because that's part of the fun. It's really getting to be able to add details and to build out that story to give it more meaning. What you're seeing right now is my artifacts collection. But let's go back to the pig and let's work on that story some more. One thing to note is that when we're talking about all the different prompts for adding the story, that is all in the handout, one of the handouts that Allison mentioned. I believe it's handout 2, but you can double check. It is a tip sheet and it has all the same tips that I'm using and all the same prompts that I'm using. It has those included for you to use as well as you create your stories. So let's talk about now, I want to add more detail. Maybe I'm writing a longer story. So I can go here and I can click edit. When you're talking about a longer story, it's really important to keep what's the most important part up front. This is what we call the bottom line up front. And you want that if someone reads only, the first sentence or two, my 18-year-old, he may not read the entire story, but he may read the first sentence or two. You want those really important pieces to be there. So for me, this is the pig, this is what it is, and this is where it came from, and this is who got it for me. Those are the most probably important pieces about this. In the Grandma's China example, again, it was, what is this, who gave it to us, and why is it special? Like those things are all very near the top. But it could be really anything to you that is the most important piece of information that goes typically in a longer story, goes to the top. We then want to add the key details. So now that we have the most important piece, the bottom line up front, what are the key details? The who, the what, the when, the where, and the why. In the short story, I have what it is, I have where it is from Chile, and I have a little bit of the why my husband got it for me. What I don't have though is when. So let's go ahead and add the when. So three-legged pig that my husband bought me in Chile when he was there in 2017. So now I've added a little bit of context to this. This is really important when you're dealing with either vintage or antique items, of course, antiquities as well. When you can start putting dates around an item in the story, it really helps people understand the historical value or significance to that. You can also, in our form here on Artifacts, you can also note when it was acquired by you. So when did you get this? So for me, it was back in 2017, and it was roughly November 1st. Let's just say roughly that time frame. How old is it? So this is a great tool as well, because maybe you got it in 2017, but maybe the pig was made in 2015 or 2016. We don't really know. So I am going to leave this field blank for now, but just know that you can always go in again and add more details. One thing I do want to note is I'm showing you and talking about telling a story here in Artifacts, but if you choose to on your own use your notebook or you have a Word document you're using on your laptop to tell your story, that's great. All of the same prompts, the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why are all still very valid. As is the keeping the bottom line up front. What is the most important piece of the story? That comes first. So all the tips and tricks that I'll share with you today can be used in any format. Simply showing them to you in Artifacts, because that is what we use in my household. So anyways, the who, the what, the when, the why. We now have those categories. What's the connection? Are there any other links to other items or stories? So in this case, there is a link to another item or story. The same trip, my husband also bought me a painting by an artist named Alberto Lagos. So I'm going to write in here like that piece of the story too. And that way, if the kids, again, if ever got hit by a bus, say I got hit by a bus tomorrow, and my daughter has to go through my stuff, she will now know that the pig and the painting are from the same trip. So I'll note this pig was purchased on the same trip that my husband bought me the Alberto Lagos print. And I could even, I'm not going to do this now because it will get a little messy sharing my screen with you, but I could even right here include the link to that print. But I'm going to pause on doing that for right now. But you can easily link the objects together. And again, it's part of telling that story. It's really connecting the dots. And you think about this, this is really important. That was one thing where with my mother, I wish I knew what pieces went together. I still remember being on her closet floor, about a week after she passed. And I was in tears because I had no clue what went together. She had a huge crystal collection and she had many pieces. And some of them she never used. And I didn't know that was because she loved the pieces so much and was afraid of breaking them, or she never used them because they were, given to her from, say, Aunt Mildred. And she's not a huge fan of Aunt Mildred. I just didn't know. But I would have loved to have known which pieces went together, which pieces were part of her wedding gifts, or which pieces did she buy over time as part of a collection. Those were all things I didn't know. So when you think about telling a longer story, think about not only the object at hand, such as this pig, but also any other related objects. And again, it helps connect those dots, helps tie it all together. The other thing to note is when you're telling a longer story, what do you want to happen to this item when you're no longer here? This is one thing that we never like to discuss, what happens when we're not here, but it's something that it can't be avoided, especially, this day and age when we have so much stuff and we're going to have someone probably have to go through our stuff at one point. So this is a great way just to note, do I want this item to be rehomed and passed down to one of the children? Do I want them to sell it? If I know there's a very high monetary value and there's no important or significant family connection or history to it, maybe I can ease the burden and tell my children or siblings or whomever, it's okay to sell this piece. Like, go ahead and sell it. It's worth a lot of money and it's okay. Do you want to donate it? Maybe you know that either there's sentimental value to you only and not to them, or maybe you want to give a donation to a specific charity. That's a great thing to know. And then maybe there's also just things where, it's gonna go in the trash. And, I accept that. I joke about it with my husband, but, we have a bunch of kids and they're very prolific artists. And I have, a bin for my youngest. It's a fairly good sized plastic bin of kit art. And I have no doubt that probably when I'm no longer here, I highly doubt she's going to want to keep that bin of kit art. And I've told her, it's okay, sweetie, you don't have to keep it. But it's stuff like that, just knowing, does it get rehomed or passed down? Do you sell it? Do you donate it? Do you recycle or trash it? So with this pig, I'm going to say this pig will one day go to my daughter. Right there. That's super duper simple. So now we know what happens to this pig if she wants it. Those are really the core components of telling the story. And again, I want to emphasize, you can use these components in whatever format you're comfortable with. But to review it, when you think about attaching stories with objects, the really important details are as follows. Who gave it to you? If you bought it, tell me more. Where were you when you bought it? Why did you buy it? What did you love about it? What inspired you about it? Tell me that story of when you bought it. Is the object new only to you, or is it new to you entirely? Any memorable events, quotes, or histories that go with the object. And then if you're telling a longer story, make sure you put that bottom line up front, add the key details, the who, what, when, where, and why to start. Think about connections. Are there other objects connected to that object? And then again, what happens this after you're gone? These tips are, again, all included in the handout, so you can easily refer to that as well as you start telling your stories about your stuff. Now that we've had the story, we've entered the story here in this field. The story is probably pretty good. I can always go back and add to it, get more details, but for now, I think the story is good. Let's talk about those details though, before we close out this artifact. Let's talk about that. So when you're entering details, especially if you're using an online platform, any online platform, or if you're writing something in social media about an object, you want to make sure you balance details with privacy. So you want to consider leaving out details that could expose someone's privacy. For example, complete addresses. I don't want to note, like this pig is, at our house at blah, blah, blah address. It's not as big of a deal when you have a ceramic 3-legged pig, but when you're dealing with, say, a Picasso painting, you don't want that, getting out that you have a $1 million painting and it's at this address. So one thing I want to note about our system here, the way that we built Artifacts, is that we have certain fields: value, current location, and documentation. You see the padlocks. Those padlocks mean that whatever you enter in these fields will stay private to you only. Even if you decide to share this artifact, or if you decide to make it public, that information is always going to be private. So I'm going to put in the value. Again, details matter. So to me, this is priceless. Quite honestly, it's probably between $0 and $100, but the value to me is priceless. It's a very unique souvenir. I love it. I keep it on my bedside table. As far as current location, so here I can note, I have shorthand for where it's kept. So I can note in shorthand where the pig is. This is a really fun field. People, I've heard from different members across our community that they will, get as specific as like which kitchen drawer the item's located in, or which part of the jewelry box, or even when they're artifacting old family photos and attached to a genealogy file, they'll note in here the location of that genealogy file. Or that file folder it's in. So this field is very flexible, but again, entirely private. But these details are really important if, again, someone has to end up going through your stuff over time. You also want to think about adding details. Dimensions are great. If you're, again, the pig is not the best example, but if you've got an heirloom dining room table and you have to move it or put it into storage, knowing what the dimensions are, what the weight is, one of the first questions movers ask you. So again, as you put in these details, you tell the story of your stuff. Details really do help you do so much more with those items. So I'm going to just briefly put in, I think the height is roughly 2 inches. Let's say he's 3 inches long, and depth, let's call it 2 inches. He's pretty round pig. Other things when you go through details, other things you may want to avoid though, are account numbers and ID numbers. Up here, again, the pig is not the best idea, but you don't want to, if you're, documenting an old family photograph, you don't want to include social security numbers or other account numbers in with that information. Just think about, protecting privacy of the individual. You also want to try to avoid publicly posting about specific dates, like birth dates or anniversary dates, things that people use in their password. You don't want to give the bad guys any help. But having said that, again, those tips are all on our tip sheet, just for you to think about security and privacy and how to balance that with the details. So now that we've artifacted this pig, I've got the photos here. If I wanted to, I could attach an audio file or a video file. And I probably will ask my husband to tell me the story of why he bought this specific pig, and I'll record him and add that to this artifact later. I've got the occasion. Let's add that in now. It's travel. So now that we know it was bought while on travel, I don't know the market shop or vendor that he bought it at, but I can ask him and find out. Love to know the artist or the maker. I don't know that either. So now that I've got this, I'm going to save. One thing I want to note is that by default, when you use Artifacts, everything is always set to private. You can choose to make it public, and you can choose to privately share, but by default, everything is always private. And we do this for your own, essentially your own, safety and peace of mind. We do not ever want to force anyone to make anything public they don't want. So you're completely and totally in control of your information. So let's click save, and then you can see the completed artifact with the story. So this is now our Chilean pig. You can see the story that we typed in here. You can see the details that we added in here. You can see the category, sculpting and forming. And you can also see, I remember I told you that tag I made from Matt with love. I am going to quickly click on that tag, and you'll see a quick view kind of all the different things my husband has given me that I've artifacted over the years. But this is the beauty of tags. I can now go through and see the different items that are all associated with that one tag. And it's quite a different collection. I've got cards that I've saved. I got jewelry. I've got different things that have meant a lot to me over the years from him, a special puzzle. So again, doesn't have to be significantly valuable to be artifacted. But if there's a story behind the object, it's worth taking the time to document it. So we're back to our pig. Now that we have this pig, This is one of the things, this is the power of when you add a story to an object. Now, what do you want to do with it? And this is the really interesting thing when you start unlocking all of that potential. If you remember the stories I shared at the beginning about grandmom's china or the brass trays, if you remember, it wasn't until the story was known that others in the family essentially came out of the woodwork with interest and astonishment and excitement about the item. So first and foremost, now that we have this, or if you're using, again, any other format, a Word doc, or you've got a book that you're writing, whatever it is, once you've taken the time to attach the story to the object, privately sharing with friends and family. On Artifacts, it's as easy as clicking the share button. I'm going to type in my husband Matt as a member, so I'll type in @Matt, and I'll just click share. But I could add a little note if I want to. I could also on Artifacts, I could say, you know what? I don't remember all those details if you remember me saying that. So I'm going to make him an editor. And I'm going to save that. So now he's an editor. He can now add details. I'm also going to share it with my daughter since she's the one that's going to get this pig down the road. So she's right here. I'm going to say, thought you might like the story behind the pig. And then share. And I'll make her a viewer because she doesn't have any details to add to the story, not yet anyways. But there we go. I've privately shared this with my husband and my daughter. That was really easy. If I wanted to say, you know, I didn't know the story behind this pig, or I had questions and I wanted to share it publicly to see if others could help kind of crowdsource the way that Allison was saying, I think you all do in your chat function, or just being, you know, members of the ACPL community, you can all help each other gather information. I could make this public, click the button, it'd be public, and then I'd have the option of sharing into Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or Pinterest. A really interesting story is that my co-founder, Ellen, she had or inherited a ring from her grandfather from the Korean War, but no one in her family knew the story behind the ring. So Ellen artifacted it with what little they did know about it, with several photos. She made it public and she shared it into Facebook, into a Korean War group. And within 10 minutes, she had, I think it was 10 or 12 different people contacting her or you know, noticing the ring and offering up like, oh, this is, you know, from Seoul, or this is, they were providing details. So there is tremendous power in being able to share the object and the story as you add more details. So that's one thing you can do with your artifact. Now that you've made it, you can share it privately or publicly. The other thing we talked about earlier was exporting it, say, to a homeowner's insurance policy or to your estate plan. Again, the pig may not be the best example of this since he's cute, but he's really not that valuable. To me, he's priceless, you can see here, but we all know he's less than $100. But if I had a priceless piece of art, or if I had jewelry or whatever it happens to be, I could click export. I could choose Excel spreadsheet, CSV file, a PDF, or a zip file. One thing to note with when we use artifacts, everything that you export comes back in the original quality that you uploaded it in. So photos, videos, everything. We do not shrink or take micro slices of your file size over time. It all goes, what you upload is what you export and download. So I could say, I want to export this as PDF for my, let's say, homeowner's insurance. Just click export, and I'll get a very nice PDF that has all of the information that we just put in, as well as, you know, I last edited it, here's the date, and then here's the extra photos. This is, again, great for any sort of uses. We have some members who also, they have their digital artifacts account, but they love to keep a binder of all of their things. And this is great. They can export the PDF and magically have their binder, and they love using it that way. You can also, another really fun function is our QR codes. This is a great way to link the digital with the physical. So you just told the story, it's all here online in the cloud. I now, you know, I want to make sure that the story never gets lost from the actual object. And given that the pig it's small, he could travel, I can print off a QR code, click print, and I would get 3 different options, 3 different sizes to choose from. And then I attach the QR code to say the bottom of the pig or the bottom of the box, safely attached, of course. But that way the pig and the story stay together. This is really great, for paintings, putting a QR code on the back of a painting, or recipes or cookbooks or other things like that. I've artifacted and done QR codes for a number of different recipes, so I know the story behind the recipe. The other thing you can do is also request a free evaluation from our partner Heritage Auctions. You can simply click the What's It Worth button, check the boxes, confirm, and off it goes. This is really important. We were talking about this before the start of the program. Sometimes, you may have a collection, say, of antique silver, and you have no idea, is it valuable? Is it simply sentimental? Is there tremendous heart value? What is it? You could click, again, the What's It Worth button, get the valuation and find out, is it valuable or is it merely sentimental? And then And this is great to help prevent fraud. If you ever have someone either in a state, you're doing an estate sale, or if you've got someone in the house helping you with either organization or downsizing or any other item, someone says, hey, that old coin collection, it's not worth much at all. Let me help take that off your hands for you. Get the valuation and find out. You never know. With that, those are all the key items you can do with your artifact now that you've attached the story with the object. To review, it's privately sharing, it's publicly sharing, it's being able to export to an estate plan or insurance agent, sending for evaluation, and also attaching a QR code with it. That was a lot to take in a very short amount of time. Again, the story tip sheets are all part of the handout, and you do not have to use the Artifacts platform to tell the story behind your stuff. But if you choose to do so, it's a very easy way to digitally create a collection as unique as you. I am going to stop here and leave plenty of time for Q&A. Before I stop, I'm going to exit out of screen share, turn the camera back on for a second. I wanted to also note that one of our gifts to you today, if you want to become a member of Artifacts, we have a discount code for 20% off any membership. The code is ACPL20, and Allison will put that into the chat as well. But as a reminder, you don't have to pay to be a member. Your first 5 artifacts are completely and entirely free. And we love for you to join us as we attach stories with our stuff. And with that, I will stop for Q&A.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting. Okay, so we do have some questions. I'm going to start at the beginning. The first one is, can you print your pages to put them in a safety deposit box?
Yes, you can definitely print your pages. If you have a printer set up to your desktop or laptop, the same way you would print any other lap page, simply click print. An easier way to do that is if you export the PDF, you then get the information arrayed in that same format I showed you with all the details, the photos, and also the last edited and when it was edited.
Awesome. Someone's wondering if the QR code can be shared publicly. Where would that information be stored?
Yes, great question. So the QR code, if you have a public artifact, you can easily share the QR code publicly. Even if your artifact is private, that you can still, share the QR code. And if people scan it, what they will see is a little pop-up message that says, please request access to this artifact. And you will get an email noting that whoever, scanned the code would like to have access to it. And you can either grant or deny access to that. So the QR codes are very versatile, but they also, just like the entire site, protect your privacy and your security.
Perfect, thank you. What data fields can you sort on? So can you sort ascending or descending, for example, by dollar value?
You can today currently not sort by dollar value. You can sort by category. You can sort by tag. You can sort, we have a free form search function, so you can very easily type in a specific either keyword or phrase, really whatever you want to sort by in that search function. You could, if you have a specific dollar value or range, you could put that into the free form search bar at the top of the page and search by that. But right now you can't essentially rank order your artifacts based on value.
Okay. They had rehome versus donate versus junk. So if you have tags, it sounds like you could do that.
Yes, definitely. And we have members who do just that. You can have one great thing about the tags, you're not limited to just one. So I have some artifacts where I've got, 3 or 4 different tags, and one of them can certainly be, rehome or even rehome, and then with the person's name next to it. One of my tags that I use the most often is Mom's Estate, and it's all the items I inherited from my mother. And I have those shared with my siblings. So we together can see them. And if someone's searching for something, you can, again, very quickly find it. But even within Mom's Estate, I have then essentially additional like sub tags. I have Mom's Estate, and then I have recipes. So all of her favorite, famous family recipes, I can, rather than looking at the entire estate of what I've inherited, I can very quickly go to the recipes, and there I get like the banana bread, or I get the cranberry sauce, the things that have been literally staples of my household for as long as I can remember. So tags are very flexible and a great way to search and filter and sort and also share.
That's fantastic. I love that.
Mhm.
Somebody was asking about the cost.
Mhm. So first 5 artifacts completely free. After that, there's 2 paid levels. The first is for $36 a year. You get up to 30 artifacts. The next level is $89 a year. You get unlimited artifacts. And you also get to add 3 people. So think of the unlimited account as really 4 accounts to the price of 1. Most of our members jump straight into unlimited because they love artifacting with others. And once you get into it and you start attaching, I think, stories to stuff, you realize, you look around, you're just like, oh my gosh, that's got a story and that's got a story. And it's really fun. And if you get siblings involved, or children or adult children, or even grandparents, it's amazing what you uncover.
Very cool. And you can go from the lower level to the next level and it doesn't disrupt your account, correct?
Yes, correct. You can at any time always upgrade. So, and if you ever want to leave artifacts, if you try it, you're like, you know what, it's not as much fun as I thought, or I'm done. That's where we have the export function as well. You can always export your entire account or a single artifact. And we truly built this to be, it's what you put in, you get right back out. We don't ever want to be the ones, holding your data hostage. That is not us. It's your information. It's your story. You're in control of it. Our goal is to empower you and ensure that, again, no one's ever in the same situation I was, where I had all the stuff and I didn't know any of the stories.
Awesome. Thank you. Someone's wondering if you can tell again about the heritage options.
Sure. So we are partnered with Heritage Auctions based in Dallas, and you can completely free of charge for our members click the What's It Worth button, and it will send your artifact information over to Heritage. They will, within 5 to 7 business days, send you back a valuation of what essentially it is realistically worth. That will be sent back to you in your artifacts account. So it will be attached to your artifact. If you remember, there was a documentation field where you could upload warranties, certificates of appraisal, receipts, you name it. They will attach it right back in, and that way it's not lost in email. Again, your artifact stays together as a single item. If you decide like, oh, wow, I didn't know it was that valuable and I want to sell it, you have an option of selling it through Heritage, but there is absolutely no obligation whatsoever. You could choose to sell it on eBay. You could choose to sell it at a garage sale, really whatever you want to do with it. Or if you just want to keep it and now you have that valuation so that, future generations know, that's great too. We have members kind of do all of the above. One thing I wanted to know, I just thought of, and I meant to, is probably is a question, but when you talk about that documentation and building that story, a lot of times people ask like, well, I put all this work into doing this. What happens if I got hit by a bus tomorrow? The great thing is that we've built in legacy contacts into the platform. So when you create your account, you can choose up to a primary and a secondary. So 2 legacy contacts, which they're the ones that will inherit your artifacts. So think of it as, the way that you inherit stuff. Your artifacts are a digital transferable asset. So just like a physical transferable asset, the artifacts are no different. You let us know who inherits your artifacts account, and that way your artifacts are never lost in cyberspace.
Perfect. And actually, that's another question that was in here. So a follow-up is, can they take over the account or the membership until the end of the year
Yes.
or however long it is?
Yep, that's exactly what happens. Your legacy contact will be given access to the account. They cannot edit the artifacts. It's your artifact, your story, but they can choose to maintain the account. They can choose to download the artifacts. They can choose to share with other family or friends. It's really, they have those permissions. They just can't edit it. Because again, it's your story, it's your artifact. So
Perfect. And then someone's asking, how long have you been in business?
we've been in business, so publicly in business, just over a year. We did establish the company December 2020. And with any good tech company, we did a beta period where we had 125 members. We invited them and they got a period to try out Artifacts, give us advice and feedback. And then that led us into building out for our public launch, which was August 2021.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, it looks like we are done with the questions. I don't see any others right there. But you know, there's been some great comments in the chat talking about how they have, a lot of people have their own heirlooms and things that they've been doing to try and keep their heirlooms with their stories. And I just think it's incredible that that's what this company does. It keeps the stories with the items. So thank you so much. Oh, someone did have a quick question. How do you back up the data?
So we as a company are cloud-based. We're on AWS, the Amazon Web Services Cloud. It's the same cloud that the US government uses. We also have redundant servers on AWS we have in the US and also over in Europe, which ensures, again, if there's ever an outage, that your data is never lost in cyberspace. We've taken all the best practices from our time in the federal government and also running and growing a private security company to really build a very mature backbone and system. Again, we also members, and this is where I think it's a personal choice, but some members really like having that, like, you know, paper copy of their artifacts, which is again why we have the ability, you can export your artifacts anytime, export it into an Excel spreadsheet, export it by PDF. It's really, the choice is yours, but again, we want to empower you to kind of, you know, be where you are with your stuff and your stories. So on the tech side, we've taken precautions to ensure that it's all backed up and it's all redundant. As far as the member experience, we've given you options to, like, how do you want to use your artifacts? How do you want to share or export or download or interact with them?
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, lots of people are talking about how this is such a great product and things that they didn't know about, and great idea. So thank you everybody for asking questions and participating today. Thank you, Heather, for a wonderful program. I know a lot of people are very excited to know that this exists. I know a lot of people have things and are trying to figure out what to do with them. So this was a good program, good timing. We're coming up to the holidays soon, so people get to start thinking about that and how their family shares stories about the different objects. So I think this is a good time.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, Allison. Like, sitting around the Thanksgiving table, this is a great conversation piece of, tell me the story behind that. Like, we did it this past year and it was fascinating. Like, the stuff you just never think about asking because it's, you see it every day, or you're like literally sitting in the same chairs every day or at the same table. And it's like, wait a second, where did this come from? Can you tell me about this? And it's it opens a whole new window into like your family history, or, you know, even just your parents' history is really cool. So I would say definitely with the holidays, ask the questions. And again, the tip sheets are there, and I want to emphasize, the storytelling questions, they can be used in any medium that you choose. It does not have to be artifacts. So please don't think like, oh, gee, I'm not going to do this. The story piece is not relevant. I would encourage you, regardless of platform or what you intend to use, to please add stories to your stuff. It will mean so much for the next generation.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Heather, and thank you for sharing. Everyone, thank you for joining us today. Hope to see you guys on Thursday. And thank you for joining for another Genealogy Center program. I hope everybody has a wonderful day.
Thanks so much, Allison. Bye.